let's start, okay? And
Okay.
I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll just
So
see where it
Valerie,
takes
I'm
us.
glad you're here.
Me too.
Welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And so why don't we just start? You tell us a little bit about yourself. And
Uh-huh.
I know that, well, I'll just let you, I won't say anything. I won't predict what you're going to say. And then we'll just go from there. So
Okay.
thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm so happy to be here. And thank you for inviting me on your amazing show. And I just love connecting and talking with others about things that make a difference. And for me, I feel like, my paradigm shift started when I became a mom. So my whole thing is, it's called Two Mamas to Love, but I want to kind of explain where that came from. And that my paradigm shift was for with motherhood, but I feel like in any transition or any kind of different thing in our lives can bring a different perspective. So not necessarily just motherhood, but for me, I thought that I was going to be a perfect mom. And the reason why I thought this was because I, first of all, didn't want to be a mom like how my mom acted towards me when I was a child. She would yell a lot, she would get frustrated, and she'd have an angry face. And I didn't like that. I remember as a child, and I would think, like, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to do this. I am always going to be calm, able to control my emotions, and smile. And so I also am a nurse practitioner. And prior to having kids, I worked a lot in pediatrics and studied so much of family dynamics, all these things of like, okay, what makes, essentially just studying how can I be this perfect parent when I become one, and so it was so within 10 minutes though, once my baby was born, she was taken to the NICU and that illusion of control just vanished. And I was remember thinking like I didn't study for this, I didn't prepare for this. And within that 24-hour time frame, I had so many emotions that were far from perfect. Like I had frustration, I was frustrated, I was anxious. I remember yelling at the staff because they wouldn't let me see my baby. It was just so kind of like this, just at first like feeling shame, I remember, and remember thinking like, how do I, what do I do now? And a lot of this, when she was in the NICU, it wasn't for very long, but I started to journal a little bit, and it helped to get my thoughts in my head onto paper. I didn't really have any purpose other than that at the time, but I remember the nurses and the doctors and all the healthcare staff before my baby was born, they called me Valerie, and but after she was born, they called me Mom, which was just kind of an observation. I wrote that down, and it was interesting because I'm like, oh wow, it kind of was like, I'm filling out this birth certificate of my baby, but I also am like reborn in a sense where I have this new name, and it's a beautiful name, but also it's not my only name. And I have so many expectations of this name, mom. Like I was going to be this perfect mom that I'm apparently not. And society has expectations of mom, but um, it just felt so different than I thought it was going to be. So I remember looking up in the dictionary, what is mom? Because I love the etymology of words. And the where does this word mom come from? This is my new name, so I should, know more about it. And I was surprised to discover that Merriam-Webster has a verb of mom and not just the title. And the verb to mother or to mom means to give birth, allow one to rise, care for, or protect. And like, if you think about that, what gives birth allows one to rise, care for, or protect. And that's love. Like, love gives birth. Love allows one or one's family to rise. Love cares and protects. And I remember that moment kind of thinking, wow, that's interesting. Maybe just love is the answer, like just choosing love as opposed to fear. Like, I have so much, like, I love the brain and neuroscience, and I love thinking about taking different pathways. So I'm like, let me try and do this more. Let me work on this more. So I did over the first year or two. was working on this verb, which I was pretty pleased with myself, and I think I was doing a good job. But I remember very vividly my 2-year-old one day. She, the one that was in the NICU, she turned into this very verbose 2-year-old, and she wasn't listening or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like that I scolded her for. But it was something, just nothing. It was something about why aren't you listening for the 10th time, or something like that. And she comes up to me and she says, "Mom, I hate your angry face, and you yell way too much." And I remember that being like such a gut punch, because I was like, I was working on this and I hated my mom's angry face and I hated how she yelled too much. And it was just this like
Oh,
reality check for me. And I remember in that moment, I realized that I still had a camera running because we had like this new sitter as a first time mom. And, like there was a nanny there and she had left, but the camera was still running. So I'm like, as a flutist, as a musician, I was like, let me assess my performance, because I don't think I was as bad as my mom. I'm going to assess how I sounded like when I scolded her. So when I listened in the camera, like to the recording, it was so eye-opening because I sounded exactly like my mom. And in my head, I was justified in whatever it was, but to the outsider, to my 2-year-old, I just had an angry face that I was yelling. That's all she saw. She didn't see in my mind. And so that was really when I decided I am going to actively do more. Obviously, how I'm living my verb, like I'm trying to, but I need to, first of all, embrace the growth mindset. I learned around that same time about Carol Dweck's work and like, how, not necessarily saying I'm a failure, because I feel like no one is a failure. We, in this pass fail philosophy, is just not necessarily true. Like we're always growing, we're always learning, and it's just not yet. So I try to write my story down almost in the patient, being my own patient of like, okay, if I try a mental back road in this moment, if I'm about to yell because we're running late, let me try gratitude right now. And then let me write down how I felt after that. And almost like exercising a different back road.
mhm.
Um, like with the brain isn't necessarily a muscle, but it works a lot in that same way. And so, how can I strengthen mental back roads of gratitude, mindfulness, kindness, not only for others but for myself? A quote that I really feel like is so powerful is Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor, famous psychiatrist or psychologist, says between stimulus and response, there's a space. And within that space lies our ability to choose, and that lies our growth and our freedom. And I didn't say it as eloquently as the quote is, but essentially it says there's a space between stimulus or reaction, I'm yelling so much that we're late or whatever, and response, that more of the logical side of our brain, there's a space. And how can I lengthen that space? And so I started writing my book and using myself as an example. And I really wanted to be in the moment with the reader. I also have a podcast that I started as well a little later on, but just to kind of talk about these techniques and know that we're all growing. And how do we live our verb in a way that not only helps us with this imperfection, knowing that we're perfectly imperfect, but also choosing love over fear and working on that, because some days are easier than others, some hours are easier than others. But again, we're all learning and we're all growing. And, my kids are learning whatever they're learning at school. And I'm learning how to continually do different mental back roads. And so that's kind of a long-winded answer to what I've been doing. But I really have been like this is kind of like my I feel like a purpose, or maybe not purpose. I mean, I do feel like it's my purpose, but it's like a calling. I feel like to say that we can be a transition person, and we can say, I have these new tools, or these tools that maybe my parents didn't have, and how can I work on them? How can I cultivate them in a way that I can then impact future generations. And I mean, and if you think about, oh my gosh, like in 100 years from now or 200 years from now, how many people that can impact? And I think that's an important part of motherhood in general, or, whatever we do in life. Uh, but like with motherhood, thinking like I feel like sometimes when you say, "Oh, I'm just a mom," or "I'm just whatever this is," but it's like, gosh, that is so powerful. And if you really zoom out, you can see that power. And it really takes these baby steps of smiling more often, or choosing gratitude, choosing mindfulness, or maybe just playing more, or allowing your inner child essentially to come out and play. So that's kind of like what I've been doing and what
I,
I really love to spread awareness for.
I totally get that. And I love what you're saying. Uh,
You.
I think one of the hardest things is for a parent to realize that they can learn from their
Hmm.
children.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I spent about 20 years doing work with high school kids and college kids, and these kinds of questions came up frequently. And and someone would say, "Well, I just don't understand why my father says this or why my mother says this," and I feel like I need to defend myself to them, and
Hmm.
I would say to them, just, well, this probably isn't about you. You're just the available person to receive what is going on inside of them. Something is going on, and that you can't know. But what you should ask is, well, so what is it that's going on, and does this have anything to do with me?
Yeah.
And I had a relationship with a person who kind of in a working situation, and I was accused of things all the time. And I realized that they were making things up because they were insecure and they were afraid to look badly, and so the psychology of being a parent and being a child, being a worker in a place where there's not really any stated there are legal things, but that there's not stated relational things about how we are to treat one another, then it becomes difficult because people have trouble. What's the word I want to say? They have difficulty managing the chaos that they feel like their life is in the center of.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. I think that, and I totally agree. And I think, sometimes while I was writing my book, I was really trying to like let the book come to me. And I would take, certain analogies or experiences that I had and say, like, should I, maybe think more about that? And one day I was teaching like a kindergarten class, a younger childhood class. Like sometimes parents can go in and teach art, like and you can go in and see the kids, which is fun. And like so, I was teaching an art class one day, and I was talking to them about perspective, and I don't remember the artist, the painting. I used to be like an art history major, so I love art and all of that. But it was one where there was a house in the background, and it was very small. And then there were kids in a circle. Gosh, I don't remember the name of the artist. But anyway, it's a fairly famous painting where the kids are dancing in a circle and there's a house in the background. And I said, like the kids, they're bigger than the house, and they're in the foreground. Trying to say that in a way for the kids to understand. But then I was thinking, like, gosh, that really makes sense. Or like what I'm writing about, a perspective of like what's in my mind, it to me is in the foreground. It's so much larger than, what maybe someone else's reality is. If they were by the house, standing by the house in the background, that wouldn't be as small. So none are, it's just different perspective. And I think that sometimes, as I've grown and, you know, I think we get caught up in our own perspective and putting on a different set of glasses to see, is this my foreground somewhere, or maybe someone else's foreground and not necessarily mine, and just seeing things from a different perspective sometimes is so important, I feel like. And so anyway, I thought that was like just, it came to me from that class.
But I think it's a great illustration, and because the things that are closer to us we see is bigger than the things that are farther away. And
Yeah.
many children feel that way too. So they don't really know what's going on in the world, but they do know what's going on with their parents. And if they see their parents kind of at odds with one another, then they take it on as something that they're responsible for, or they have caused to happen, and that sort of thing. It's when it could be the parents' work situation is causing the conflict or something like that, totally detached from the child. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, it's so interesting. How many children do you have?
I have three kids.
And how old are they?
They are, how old are they now? I have to like pause and think about it. 5, 7, and 9. So they're still kind of on the younger side.
Yeah.
They're getting older every day. I don't know how time goes so fast.
When my children reached about that age, um, I felt like uh, they were asking me things and I was giving them answers all the time.
Mm,
And I felt that there was not, it wasn't really healthy for me just to be the answer man and always have the right answer because they would become dependent upon me. And I'm glad for them to be dependent upon me in a certain sense, but I didn't want to dictate to them what they should think. I want them to figure out for themselves. So I started to treat my children as adults. The oldest was 12 and the youngest was 5. And it was easier for do it with the 12-year-old. But what I would do is ask them questions. And they'd ask a question, I'd ask questions in return. I'd get, and I'd help. And this is what I would do in my consulting. I'd keep asking questions and help walk people through a process of thought so that they arrive at their own conclusion,
mhm.
because that's their conclusion is the one they'll actually implement. They won't implement my conclusion. They'll implement their conclusion. And it really helped in the communication that I had with my children, so that even today, as are all in their 30s, and one will turn 40 in a couple of weeks, our communication is sterling. I mean, because we treat each other as if we're the same age,
Yeah.
but that took a long time to get to that. Um, I do know more than they know, but they have to understand their life situation differently than I see it because they have to live with it. So
Mhm.
they don't necessarily take my advice, but they're willing to have conversation with me about these things and I'm just going to ask questions because I want them to think clearly about what they're doing. And I think that's something that a lot of parents don't know how to do. And it's because their parents didn't do it and they didn't get it in school. And they've never been around people who ask questions rather than just give answers.
Yep. And I think that's so true. And I love that. Like I notice, um, when I notice other parents asking questions or like how you get this different response. And I'm reflecting on, do I do that as much? I don't know. I mean, I feel like I probably can I should be asking more questions. And what comes to my mind because of your background, with the sunrise here is I remember in particular, another time that I was writing, I was trying to get more examples of play and the play mental back road. So when I'm frustrated, how can I be more playful or meet my kids in their play? And, with my youngest, she was probably 4 at the time. It's hard as an adult to play for a long time with, I think it was ponies and unicorns. And like
Yeah.
I would shake it around, shake its hair around and be like, no, you're not doing it the right way. And so, oh my gosh, I don't really know how to do this. Tell me how to play. So I tried to be mindful in that minute or whatever it was of like, let me just really try to meet her where she is because she's trying to teach me how to play. Because I think I did say that. I'm like, I don't know how to play. Teach me how to play. And she's like, you just do this and this. And so it was like a nice moment. But later on in the day, she comes up to me and it was the sunset. And she says, Mom, look at the colors in the sky. It looks just like those unicorns we were playing with. It's a unicorn sunset. And I was like, oh my gosh, like those colors are so unicorn like. Like I think that it was just such a cool moment that I learned from my 4-year-old of like just pausing and looking up at the sky because now we still do that like a year later of like, oh, it's a unicorn sunset or like look at and so it's just those little things that you think are maybe so silly of this dancing pony like swinging its hair around or whatever. But then I learned something about pausing and looking up at the sky and having those mindful moments. And so I think it's we can be so surprised at what we learn. I mean, that's talking about like when they're a younger age, but I feel like at any age, it's that curiosity. And I love how you're saying asking those questions and being curious about that. And so yeah.
I'll call what you shared with each other. That experience becomes what I call a generational memory.
Uh,
And and that you can tell that story at her wedding reception
yeah.
because
Yeah.
it will demonstrate the bond that you two have with each other going back to when she was 4. And
Mm,
and she'll remember that with the same joy that she feels with today. And I think these are really important moments that we capture and we should return to as remember that, look at that sunset. That reminds me of, things like that. Because then that's the sort of thing that joins us together at some emotional level where we are willing to, I guess the word would be intimate with each other. Intimate as a 4-year-old can be, but still that there's this joining together of the two, the parent and the child, in a way that transcends chaos and differences of opinion and failures and all these other things that come along that
mhm.
actually enables us to move through those hard moments with these beautiful moments of generational memory.
I love that. I think that's so true. And we were talking, or you were mentioning earlier about like the past, present, and future, and it reminds me kind of that of like this. I love history, and I just love history, and time travel type stuff is just so interesting. Of like, oh, if I could travel back in time, where would I go, and all this stuff. But anyway, all that to say that our brain is a time travel machine all the time. We're constantly traveling to the past with rumination or the future with anxiety, or maybe it's not rumination or anxiety, but like we're seldom in the present. But the only place we can meet other people is the present. Like it's a lonely time machine because I can't take whoever I'm with to the past because I have a different perspective of whatever happened or to the future, but I can meet them in the present and we can be Charles Dickens. I love a Christmas Carol. When I was writing the book, it was during I don't remember when during the pandemic, but it was during that time where we were exposed to the virus right before Christmas, and we couldn't go anywhere. We had to cancel our plans. So I read, I kind of didn't read through the whole book, but I just like kind of reviewed it, and I really identified with that ghost of past, present, and future. And Charles Dickens' ghost of the Christmas present says, come here and know me better, man. You have never seen the likes of me before. And it was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. Like we just don't really know the present. And that Christmas was one of my favorite Christmases because I was forced to be in the present moment. And or like with the unicorn or whatever that is, like you're with someone else. You're not in your head, which I feel like we're so much in our head all the time.
I think what we do in those moments
Hmm.
is we invite your child invited you into her world and she gave you a gift of a memory that will
Yeah.
always be of her. And I think we do that as parents as well. But I think to think of this as kind of we gift to each other these things which bind us together.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Nothing else that we do does that for us. And so it has to be mutual. And I
Love that.
traveling, went into a bookstore, and I saw something I wanted that I bought for my grandson. I saw this stuffed bald eagle. He's 2.5, and I saw this. I said, "Oh, Benny will love that." So I bought it and I sent it to him, and he will always know that that came from me. And the next time I see him, whenever that is, we'll talk about the bald eagle, and so I think those things are important for parents to understand. So let me ask this question, and because let's suppose that there are moms watching, and I know
Mhm.
there will be. Maybe they're not watching because they are a mom, but they're a businesswoman or something like that. But let's just put them in the frame of mind that they're a mom.
Mhm.
What would you suggest as one or two things for them to do to to I don't want to say be a better mom because that's not really what we're talking about, but be a more relaxed and aware mom,
Mm.
one who's aware of who she is and can express that in a peaceful, joyful, kind of non-anxious way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question. And I would say wholeheartedly that we are entirely too hard on ourselves as moms and to embrace imperfection. We
Hmm.
are all perfectly imperfect. And I would not want a perfect mom. I wouldn't want one because life isn't perfect. And the more we are able to have that self grace and to say, you know what, I am going to honor these imperfections, but also, learn from them and grow from them. And there's this art, this Japanese art form, kintsugi, where they put gold into the cracks,
Huh.
where put beauty. It's honoring the beauty and the strength of imperfection. And I think that, especially nowadays with social media and like just this comparison of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It takes away from just being you. And that's what your child wants. I mean, or at least, and I can only say that for myself. I know that, and maybe my kids will later on be like, Mom, you talked all the time about this. And all that to say is that I just think we take being perfect too seriously. And all I know is what I wanted, as growing up was this like, why was mom always so like just frustrated all the time because I just wanted to be. I just wanted to be. And that's what I feel like, when I do that, when I slow down enough to just be, I feel like it helps both of us in a way. And I certainly am not, an expert either. And I think that's what ties us together is that, I feel like there's so much of people that are preaching from, whatever their degree is or whatever this is of here's what you should do or shouldn't do. And it's like, well, we all are in a community together and you know what's best for your child. You know that the best. And I think that that is so powerful in itself. And so I try to, that's those things kind of keep me relaxed and not relaxed because I'm just a type A person, but I would say grounded more because sometimes I can be like, oh my gosh, we're going to be late and I'm going to get judged or whatever that is. But at the same time, it's like, okay, let me take a step back and say, what in this moment, this is, I'm reacting in this moment as opposed to responding. Let me slow down and just be grateful for the fact that we're late because my child wanted to play with me right now. We're still running late and I want to get there on time, but let me just take that pause. And the more I practice that, the more I feel like I feel like just give myself grace that, it's okay. I think that now that it's the fall, I love this analogy because I think, just so beautiful that nature gives us of the fact that there are the leaves are changing. So many trees were green and now they're becoming yellow, orange, and red. And the green is the chlorophyll from the leaves, which when there's darkness and when there's coldness, when there's decreased light, that is when the chlorophyll lessens and brings out the inner colors of the leaves, in particular the yellows and the oranges. And we say how beautiful fall is, like fall is gorgeous. And that is from darkness and coldness. So I think we like underestimate that perfection is, or we, I guess, overestimate perfection and underestimate when things are not perfect and the growth and the beauty that can come with that. So that's what a long-winded answer, but I would say
I like it
it's
very much.
yeah, yeah. So it's okay. You got this.
It
So what I
is. Um, it's I've been having this a conversation similar to this for the past few months, and the conversation centers around whether happiness is a good goal for our lives. And because happiness, and when I come back and say, well, I think happiness is fleeting. It's really just an emotional reaction to something that's gone on and what is really permanent is hardship and stress and suffering and pain and heart and work. And if these things are the things that are normal and that we overcome them with success and happiness, that thing, but those things are not permanent. And the hard stuff is permanent. Um, and one of those conversations was about how we help children understand that. And because we are the products of all these prior generations who have told us this is the way it should be. I'm very generational thinking, as you can tell. And
yeah,
so, so if I was to meet your oldest child, I believe, is she a daughter? She's a daughter, right?
yes, yeah, my oldest, yeah.
If I was to meet your oldest daughter, what would you want me to say to her as an adult who is concerned for her welfare and wants for her to have the best life she can have? What would you like for me to say to her as a 9-year-old? As a part of that, what would you like me to say to her about how she cares for you as her mother? Because I think that's part of this dynamic that we're talking about is when the children recognize that they can care for their parents, not just the parents caring for the child. So what would you like for me to say to your daughter if we met today and I had this lovely little conversation with her?
I think that's such a great question. So what comes to my mind is that she really likes braiding her hair. And I think the braid, as you were talking earlier, you made kind of a braid symbol, and it made me think of a braid.
Yeah.
And yes, and I think that it is very powerful, that visual, because it does talk about how like we are all connected, as a healthcare I not even really as a healthcare provider. I was going to say as a healthcare provider, but as it's more like with storytelling. I think where my brain's going at with this is our heart rates can synchronize, and there is more to this world than we see. And I love how you talk about the generations because storytelling can bring that out and synchronize, you know, whatever that story is, it can surpass time itself or be braided, like the hair can be braided in one. So knowing that, like, what we affect each other, I guess is what I'm kind of saying with all of that. So I'm trying to think of what well, for me, being so into history, I would want to know, or I would want her to know that there's an importance of storytelling and like for you to share a story about when you were 9 or whatever, something like that. But again, I keep thinking about the braid and how like we're all connected. And even like when you go to the beach, and I think it's fascinating to think that, the waves can affect our heart rate, but the waves are being impacted by the moon and by outer space, but it's literally impacting our own bodies, I think is just mind-boggling. And so I think, yeah, just knowing that everyone is more connected than we realize, I guess.
If I asked her, do you know what makes your mother happy? Do you think she could answer that?
Oh, I think that's really interesting. What
Other
would
than
she?
other than a clean room.
Oh my gosh. I know. Huh. No, I don't know if she would, because yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That is a really, she'd probably say chai tea. She would say that I like having chai tea.
I think I think the challenge is how to help our children become aware of our own needs
Yeah,
as adults and as parents. And so um,
I love that. I'm gonna ask her that. I want to know what she thinks.
ask her that. Tell her this guy that you talk to online, wants you to tell you what she sees as the thing that makes you happy. And see that then that becomes another one of those generational moments.
I like that. My son, he really is like observing those things, and he really is spot on when he's like, for your birthday, I want to give you this. He told me he wanted to give me a secret passage in my house because I love history. I'm like, I
Oh,
would love
right. That's
that.
oh,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about your book and where we can find it.
Yeah, thank you. So my book is called Two Mamas to Love, Pioneering a New Kind of Motherhood. It's available on Amazon as a paperback and ebook. And you can also check out my website, twomamastolove.com. And there you can find my book as well as my podcast. And I also am active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Substack. I would say are probably the big ones that I'm most active on. But I mean, I would say really the big themes of my book are kind of what we talked about of embracing imperfection and mental backroads and highways. I also kind of go into more of different perspectives of what my mom had experienced versus what I experienced as a child. And on the cover, there's monarch butterflies and sunflowers. And that was really important for me to include those because sunflowers exhibit heliotropism, where they essentially will move with the light.
Right.
Um, and also, it's interesting that the younger sunflowers, those have to bend, their stems needs to bend to the opposite direction in order to reach the light. And plants have to be flexible. They can't be just stiff because sometimes you do have to kind of bend and move different ways in order to see the light. As well as, monarch butterflies, I think there's so many analogies with the transformation, but also I thought it was very interesting that when I learned that butterflies have one butterfly will migrate from north to south for the winter to Mexico or to California, depending on where in the country you are. And then when going back up in the spring from south to north, it's numerous generations. So I
Huh.
think that's just so interesting in the sense that like you can kind of view yourself in whatever scenario you're doing in parenting of am I a southbound monarch where I'm the lone one doing this and changing the journey for my kids? And I think in some ways I feel like I had to be, but in other ways it's like how do I perpetuate legacy? Is how am I a northbound monarch where I want to pass this on. Like I want to smile more. And my grandma did that. She smiled so much. And so I want to continue that, these little things here and there, like my mom loved history. So like I want to continue that history thing. So I just think that those uh, insects, I guess, I don't know if butterflies are considered insects, but monarch butterflies teach us so much. And I try to make a lot of parallels between nature and I think there's so much to be said about simplicity being underrated and ease being overrated. And you talk about like generations and all of that. And I think that, just yesterday I learned about the harvest moon and how it's the full moon. It's celebrated in certain cultures where it's, back when you needed more light to gather the harvest more before all of the modern day comforts we have. But there's so much we lose sometimes to history of like how I gathered my tomatoes. I had 85 tomatoes I got from my garden. And that took so much time, which was interesting how much time it took. But also it helped my mental state. Like it helped me to get out into the garden and move my hands and like not be scrolling on my phone. And I think that's so important to learn from prior generations of like, there's so much importance to things that are simple and maybe not may not be easy. Like simplicity sometimes is so hard, but I think so much of the time it shows that that is what's worth it. So anyway, that's kind of like what I love to talk and make those analogies. And but I also love connecting with other moms. And even if you're not a mom, I love neuroscience. And so motherhood, again, like I said at the beginning, was kind of like what my paradigm shift was, but there's so many other paradigm shifts out there and so many other things. Like my brother and I will talk, he doesn't have kids, but like there's so many aspects that I feel like we just need to give ourselves more grace and really just love as a verb. That like that's whatever you're doing, how are you doing it in a verb? Because sometimes that's all you can control in this life. You know, you can't really control a lot other than how are you living your verb in this moment right now? How are you choosing love over fear? And sometimes taking that baby step and breaking that down is all you can really do. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I love to hear mothers talk about their children, particularly as they learn how to be a better mother by being a better person. And that's what you're describing to us, and the pressure to achieve and the pressure to be perfect is, you know, fathers feel the same way, but in a different way, a totally different way. But we're all feeling that because we feel like the stakes that we have in our world today are so high that any little error we feel like is going to be crushing, but it's really not true. I think as long as you can go over and give your give your son or your daughter a big hug and say I love you and and I always will, if you can say that to them every day, they'll remember that. And even when you're at your worst, they'll still remember that hug because that's what really means something to them.
So true. I love that. I love that. A hug sometimes is what makes all the difference. Saying I love you and a hug. It can be so simple, but yeah, we forget, and I think that's so every day I try to do that as much as I can. Make that a habit.
Well, thank you, Valerie, for being here. And thank you all for watching. And I hope you take away something that will encourage you to be maybe a more compassionate, caring person today with the people that you're around. And if you do not live with your children any longer because they've grown up, give them a call and just say, I'm just thinking of you and I love you. And never forget that because that's really something that stays with us all the time. So thank you, Valerie. And it's great to see you. And we'll see you all next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.
Thank you.
So